weekend. He's got Eldrazi Displacer, a waste to find with his Evolving Wilds. He wants to be able to kind of combo up a little bit, I would say. So you're going to find, Eldrazi Displacer really good with Reflector Mage, really good with Bounding Crassus, and just a good Magic card in general. Another extremely powerful card to company into, another solid body. The issue, of course, is the colorless mana. There's not a whole lot in the deck. Jim is playing a waste alongside Evolving Wilds and 4 copies of Yawgmoth's, so it's not like the colorless mana is that reliable, but Displacer is a solid body in its own right. It's an Evolving Wilds here from Jim Davis to start off round number 1 of our Columbus Invitational. He'll search for an island. His opponent, Sean Evans, blue-white mid-range. Kind of a weird deck to kind of classify, honestly. There's a lot going on in Evans' deck. So I think the core of what Evans is trying to accomplish here is ignore combat on the ground, which makes a lot of sense because Collected Company and the white human deck are so effective at brawling on the ground. He is almost exclusively flyers, and he plays a flash game of his own with threats like Rattle Chains, Dimensional Infiltrator, 4 copies of Ojutai's Command, 4 copies of Reflector Mage, 2 copies of Archangel Avacyn. So he's trying to play a similar game and avoid combat on the ground. A couple of copies of Prairie Stream for Evans to start. For Davis, you saw a Forest and a Sylvan Advocate. Now you're going to find a Canopy Vista. He'll attack for 2 Vigilance with the Advocate. So Evans will fall down to 18, our first damage here of the weekend. Now, one thing to keep in mind is Jim is just going to pass the turn back. His deck is kind of the one that's being gunned for this weekend. It set the paces last weekend in Baltimore. It was a dominant performance by Jim. And Kevin Jones, we can't forget that because he was really one of the people who put the flash aspect in this deck. Now the question is, how does Jim adjust when people know that this is kind of the deck to beat as he plays a Bounding Crassus? Well, the nice thing about Davis's list here is there's just a lot of raw power in it. And Displacer, I can imagine being a nice tool in the mirror match because uncontested, it's going to be a dominating presence. And the company decks are not very good at removing creatures from the battlefield in a permanent sense. You saw Evans just play a Port Town pass the turn back. Davis is going to play a Yawgmoth's, and just unlucky for him, he's got nothing to do. Yep. So unfortunate. He just has to pass the turn back. Now, I believe a Dimensional Infiltrator, something you're very familiar with, given all your sealed play. 2-1 Flash Fire. You can pay a colorless and a Wingding. Exile the top card of your opponent's deck. If it's a land, you can return it to your hand. There's very little in the way of colorless mana in Evans' list. He has 2 copies of Westvale Abbey, but he has Evolving Wilds and isn't even bothering to have a waste in his deck. This is just another Flash Flyer. Unfortunately for that Flash Flyer, it's a 2-1 against a board of a 3-3 and a 2-3, so the power and toughness don't really line up all that great. I was about to say, Evans' start here on 2x Prairie Stream is already a really bad sign for his deck. He's got 4 copies of Prairie Stream and 4 copies of Evolving Wilds, so there's an understanding that some of his lands are going to enter the battlefield tapped, but he doesn't have anything to do on the first turn, but he has a lot of 2-drops in Dimensional Infiltrator, Rattle Chains, and Hangerback Walker. So opening up on 2 lands that enter the battlefield tap, already a bad start for a deck as tempo-oriented as Evans. Well, Evans tried to catch up on tempo with the Reflector Mage, but Jim had no Ojutai's Command for that, so he countered the Reflector Mage and drew a card. So maybe he did have a little something to do with 4 mana, all kidding aside, as that is a big proponent of Jim's deck. He can really play on his opponent's turn. Both of these decks are pretty good at playing on the opponent's turn, which means the person who gets ahead on the battlefield is a huge favorite. And you see Jim starting out a lot more smoothly. He was on the play to begin with, had plays on 2 and 3, and now Evans has to play into Davis's mana, and that's a very hard thing to do against company. For Davis, he played in Evolving Wilds and passed the turn back over to Sean. Sean will take his 5th turn of the game. It appears at least a little bit of mana trouble for him, but he's just gotten off the ground very slowly. Port Town did not enter the battlefield untapped to be able to catch Reflector Mage on time. Here's a copy of Always Watching. We think this card's going to be very popular in Standard, and it will resolve. Here's an attack from Evans with the Dimensional Infiltrator. But only a single copy in Evans' list. He's not necessarily trying to win combat by making his creatures larger. This is a fine card to have as a one-of. Really, what Evans' deck is trying to accomplish is ignore combat altogether with efficient flyers, things like Topogeist to manage the damage race. But he's just so far behind on the battlefield at this point. You see Davis search up a Plains with the Evolving Wilds. Now he's going to resolve a Collected Company, and this could be game over right here, as we have seen so many times from this Bant Company deck. We'll see what Jim does find. Bounding Crassus, 2 of those, means that he'll be attacking for a lot more than 8 next turn, as Jim Davis is going to win game number 1 here over Sean Evans. Bant Company very quickly up a game here over blue-white mid-range. Jim making it look pretty easy there. Well, when you're on the play and you're playing against a tempo deck, the tempo deck doesn't do anything for the first or second turn of the game. As long as you have reasonable things to do with your mana, you're probably going to be fine. To the sideboards is where we're going to go now, and we will take a look at Sean Evans, who's got 4 Dispel, 4 Invasive Surgery, 2 Secure the Waste, 2 Negate, 2 Invocation of Saint Trapped, and then 1 copy of Tragic Arrogance. What do we like here?
I think he wants some amount of the counter spells to fight back against Collected Company and to a lesser extent Ojutai's Command. I wouldn't want to have the full 6 counters in this matchup because Davis doesn't have that many spells, but I could see bringing in probably less than the playset of negates, but some number I would want here.
On Jim's side, he's got 3 Lantern Scouts, 3 negates, 2 Dispel, 2 Clip Wings, and then quite a few one-ofs here in Declaration in Stone, a Silk Wrap, a Feldar Cub, a Hidden Dragon Slayer, and a Den Protector.
So Davis doesn't probably know exactly what's going on in Evans' list, but he's got a sense that it's a blue-white attacking deck. To that end, additional removal spells like Silk Wrap and Declaration in Stone should be good in this matchup. The 2 copies of Clip Wings, I would imagine. He doesn't know exactly what's in Evans' list, but he saw Dimensional Infiltrator. You can assume there's other flyers. And I think I would want the 3 copies of Lantern Scout as well, because this is going to be a damage race. Evans is trying to avoid blocking in general, and so giving your team lifelink is a very good way to manage a damage race.
Well, that'll give you an idea of what both players are working with, and as I do shuffle up here for game number 2, Sean Evans will be on the play, but we'll take this moment to talk about StarCityGames.com Game Night, the very popular promotion, and I know this is one of your this is one of your favorite things to do, so welcome back to the booth, baby.
So Slobbering Mile Driver, I guess, is a parody on Goblin Pile Driver, slobbering because there's a dog, and I'm guessing mile for non-American viewers, that's a unit of measurement we use to when you're driving and such. I guess he's driving several miles with the slobbering dog in the back seat. Go.StarCityGames.com/game night. Figure out where you can get your hands on this.
Well, there's more. There's more. There's May.
Okay.
We can't forget about May and Mandatory Mentor.
That is great.
That's obviously a planned Monastery Mentor, and one of our favorite ones now for June. We've got Otter Spell.
I like the Manatee one. I grew up, people who are in their mid-30s probably know, I grew up at a time of manatee awareness.
I actually did not know this.
In elementary school, it was sort of a big, environmental thing at the time. Was manatees were getting run over by boats and like hunted to extinction or whatever. So
okay.
I do appreciate, for people in their mid-30s, you'll appreciate the Manatee one. And Otter Spell kind of stands on its own right.
Go.StarCityGames.com. Yes. It does its thing,
yeah.
/game night for more information. As we get ready here for game number 2, we are going to learn a little bit more about our Players Champion. That is, of course, Jim Davis, who he won the Players Championship. He beat Todd Anderson in the finals last year, walked out of Roanoke with $20,000, a big trophy, and really putting his name in the bright lights on the SCG Tour. Now, I think it was big for Jim last weekend. He's always someone who has a lot of confidence, but be able to say, hey, I won this tournament leading into the Invitational, that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, big deal. And for Jim, very good for sports fandom lately. Stony Brook alma mater, they made their NCAA tournament debut a little while ago, and his New York Rangers, beloved New York Rangers, in the playoffs.
Apparently they're pretty good this year.
Yeah.
That's what I've been told. The 31-year-old from Long Island, New York, he's got 10 open top 8s, 2 Ws, along with 2 invitational top 8s, looking for his 3rd one here this weekend. He is your 2015 Players Champion. He's a local DJ. He loves hockey, as Patrick did mention, and he loves playing the game of Magic, and right now he is playing it at a very high level, maybe the highest level of his entire career.
It's been a very good 3-month stretch, and that's the reason that I selected Davis as the player I expect. If I had to bet on one person to win this tournament, he'd be my choice.
If you were a betting man.
If I was a betting man.
Which you're not.
Which I'm not.
But if you were.
Certainly not as it pertains to the outcome of Magic tournaments, as that is banned by the Duelist Convocation International, DCI for short.
For Sean Evans, as he does shuffle, he's going to have to tie things up here. Now, his draw in that last game, not particularly good. I think his deck is capable of a lot more than that.
And honestly, I like the logic of I can play with Evolving Wilds and the Shadowlands and the Battlelands because I can afford to have the first land enter the battlefield tapped. I don't know if you can really handle the second one, as we saw in that game, and that's why I am a little suspicious of Westvale Abbey in this list. I know that it's a very powerful card, but it interacts very poorly with the other lands that enter the battlefield tapped. And as you saw there, Evans is on a lot of pressure to do something on the second turn of the game, especially in this matchup. And I just don't. The way this deck is constructed, it doesn't seem like he's trying to play a long game with Westvale Abbey. And he's got 2 copies of the Secure the Waste as sort of his late game trump to begin with. So
I think one of the things that's unique about Westvale Abbey in this particular format, we saw it in Baltimore last week, and we'll see it here this week, and I'm sure it's obviously a very good card, but finding the home for that card is difficult.
Well, that's why I thought the second place list made a lot of sense, because it was a single color. So your Westvale Abbey isn't tripping up your Battlelands and your Shadowlands.
Sure.
Once you're into the second color, the opportunity cost of Westvale Abbey goes up by quite a bit, and I'm not sure if a deck like Evans can really afford to be playing certainly 2 copies.
Well, here's a Port Town, going to reveal Plains, and this is at least a better start starting off with a Toppelgeist. At least getting to the board.
Yes. In this kind of matchup, the person who loses is likely to die with cards in their hand. The game gets over very, very fast. So even just 1/1 flyers for one are probably fine cards to be playing in the matchup, and Topplegeist is a little bit more than that.
Just the planes there for Evans, an attack and a passing of the turn back to Davis, who started off with a forest. And now we'll see where he moves next. Now, one of the things to keep in mind with Jim's deck, last weekend you saw the mana base he had. You have Mycos, 4 copies of Lumbering Falls, Evolving Wilds, a lot of basics, a couple of Shadowlands, and a healthy amount of Battlelands. This weekend, no Shadowlands, so you're not going to find any fortified villages here. No port towns either.
Yeah, once you're into Eldrazi Displacer territory, I think that warps your mana base into a place where at least one of those 2 dual lands has to be removed from the deck.
It's a Sylvan Advocate and a passing of the turn for Davis. For Evans, he'll start by playing a Plains. Now it's an attack here with Topplegeist, and he'll just pass the turn back yet again. So he's got to get a little bit more to the board here if he can, as we head back Jim Davis's way. For Jim, he'll start by attacking with the Sylvan Advocate. Evans will take that. He'll fall down to 18. The follow-up here for Davis. It appears to be a Duskwatch Recruiter, but does he have a 3rd land? The answer is yes, and Lumbering Falls. Though white mana currently missing here for the Players' Champion as we head back over to Sean Evans.
This is a new star from Shadows over Innistrad, though I think this might be a matchup that's not very good for the Recruiter. I think the games are likely to be over too fast.
It appears to be an Invocation of St. Trath, and I think you felt he might bring this in?
I thought there was a chance. The problem is with Reflector Mage and Eldrazi Displacer, there's a lot of ways for this to go wrong. But if the game is a pure race, this is one of the most powerful cards in Standard.
We saw this in a lot of sideboards last weekend. Didn't see it have much of an effect. Now, this is a matchup-specific card. You're going to find this card to be pretty good against Eldrazi. You're going to find it to be pretty good against any of the ramp decks that are out there. Again, I think I agree with you on the whole. Not great for this particular matchup, but if it is a damage race, and if Davis does not find Eldrazi Displacer or Reflector Mage, he'll die very fast.
Davis doesn't even have white mana right now.
Yeah.
So he's way off from being able to answer this.
This will be an attack for Fortified Jim. Going to bring Evans down to 14. And we had talked about this a lot in Baltimore last weekend, as well as we watched Jim work his way towards the title there. Didn't really have mana issues in Baltimore. We saw the mana work out just fine. Now, he's stretching it here this weekend. Sure, Eldrazi Displacer costs white mana, but you got to be able to play a waste to be able to do it. Collected Company, well, if you can cast it, it can overcome some mana issues.
And I love Davis main phasing this. He cannot risk this Collected Company getting countered because he needs to find an answer as soon as possible.
For Jim, it looks like he's found a copy of Eldrazi Displacer. Well, what else has he found to go along with it is the question. I believe it might be another copy of Sylvan Advocate. Actually, it's a Tireless Tracker, excuse me.
Another card that gives this deck a little bit of late game staying power, much like the Recruiter, but this is not the kind of matchup where that sort of effect is something that Davis is really looking for.
Now, Jim does have quite a few sources of white mana in his deck. You count the Evolving Wilds, of course, 3 Plains, 2 Canopy Vistas, and 3 Prairie Streams, so white mana typically not a problem. But again, he had to make some room for some additional copies of My Coast for colorless mana, and that 1 copy of Waste that might, in most circumstances, be another Plains.
Though right now, Waste would be a great draw, because if Davis can get this Displacer online, managing the damage race becomes very easy.
It's an attack there with the Topplegeist. Invocation of St. Trath will make the Angel, and now there will be a transformation here into a Werewolf, as Davis will draw a card. It is Kallenhorde Howlard. That is quite the mouthful.
And the back, a combo with the front half, because you get a bunch of creatures, they're kind of glow in your hand, now they're all cheaper.
Yep. Can't get anything by you.
Then it flips back to the other side, and you got to figure out a way to get back over, but it's a cool design.
It is. I actually like this card a lot. I think this card's going to play a huge role in Standard, as here is an attack from Jim Davis. You see Evans at 14, Davis at 8. It's a race here, and it's currently a race I think that Jim's going to win, so Sean needs to do something else to get on the board.
Well, this hit looks short of lethal.
It is. Looks like an attack for 11. But that would bring Evans down to 3, and I don't know if Evans can attack back for 8 next turn. So things are becoming pretty difficult, and you do have to wonder what's in Jim Davis's hand right now as well. Looks like he does have a copy of Jace. But not too much else going on here for the Players' Champion.
But you can understand the logic of Evans's deck. Look at the creatures that are on Davis's side of the battlefield here. They're all creatures that are very effective at playing a combat game on the ground. They're not necessarily that effective at fighting a bunch of flyers. So Evans is playing with a lot of underpowered cards, but there is an angle he's trying to shoot here.
For Evans, it feels like he's got something in hand. Again, the question is what? As he's looking at the damage that's being dealt to him, does he have some sort of instant speed spell or blocker in this circumstance.
His deck's got a lot of 5-drops in it, and he's passed through the last couple of turns not doing anything. His hand just might be a little jammed up.
This is a Dimensional Infiltrator. See if it's here to block or not. Figure out where we are in the turn. Again, right now, if Evans takes all this damage, he'd fall down to 3, and then he'd be able to crack back for 7. But we're not actually at declare blockers just yet, it appears. So looks like Sean, Jim, there's some back and forth here on this attack. It's a pretty important one. Perhaps Jim has another Collective Company. It looks like the answer is yes, that he does. Now look at the thumbs up. This is a big one here for Davis. He finds a card like Reflector Mage. This game's probably over.
Yeah, I think Reflector Mage will be too much to overcome in this spot. He could also find Lantern Scout. That would also be excellent here.
That would have been a huge one if it's in his deck. It looks like a Hidden Dragon Slayer.
Just looks like more stuff on the ground here.
Yeah. Yeah, it's another Recruiter as well, so not a lot going on. So Sean Evans can steal this one. You see, he's going to do the math on how much damage he's going to take. It's not lethal just yet, Sean.
Evans doesn't have to chump block here, and if he goes into the turn, this block I think cuts. No, I think always watching still gets the job done.
Won't pump the Angel token.
Oh no, then yeah, then he. I don't know if the chump block produces anything of value in that spot.
Okay.
If that's the case, because I think he's overwhelmingly dead next turn, and he needs to just give himself as many draws as possible.
Evolving Wilds is the land. He does not look happy to have that be his draw step. You see a copy of Dispel in hand. Wasn't able to cast that this game. Here's an attack. Going to bring an Angel along with it. So 5 damage will come through. Davis is going to fall down to 3. And I think Davis is going to very confidently untap here. He's probably wondering, how the heck am I going to lose this one? If at all.
Well, some sort of fog effect could make it complicated if Davis doesn't have something like Colorless Mana for the Displacer or the ability to cast a Reflector Mage.
Now, the Recruiter, I believe, should have transformed there. No spell played by Evans?
Yeah, it's daytime.
Yeah, it should. I believe it should have transformed.
No, it's.
Well, he collected company into it last turn, and then for Sean, he just untapped attack, didn't do anything. Yeah, so it should be the Horde. It should be nighttime for that. This is something that we saw a little bit last weekend. I think we're going to see it this weekend a little bit too. People got to get familiar with playing with werewolves again.
Yep.
It's been a minute.
I thought you were referencing the first copy of the Recruiter.
Gotcha.
I forgot that the company found the second copy. Yes, that should also be flipped over.
And they fixed that now. Jim is going to shrug their shoulders and I think attack with everything, and that is going to do it. Jim Davis is going to win this match here over Sean Evans. 2-0. Bad Company will take care of blue-white mid-range, and for your 2015 Players Champion, and more recently, your SCG Baltimore Champion last weekend. He's off to a great start, 1-0.
He is. I think there is something going on with Evans's deck. When I saw the list, I immediately understood what he was trying to go for here, and I think that it's a reasonable way to try to attack both Collective Company